Good morning, Lucy. Welcome to One for the Road. How are you today?
I am fabulous, Dave. Do you know, this is the first time in 8 years that my children have gone on holiday with their father. So I am luxuriating in this child-free space.
Oh,
At the moment,
amazing.
I am, although I'm not on holiday, it feels like a holiday to me. So I am enjoying it.
Plenty
How
of
are you?
lay-ins. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I've got this big daft dog, so I don't get a chance to lay in because she's scratching the door at 7:30 every morning for her breakfast. So I am a glutton for punishment, as my mother says. Nothing is enough. I always take on far too much.
Well, there's an answer to that is let her in the bed.
Or,
Uh-uh.
or else, yeah, that's true, maybe. She's a
Well,
very hairy dog. My white
I
sheets, I don't think they would last.
no, I've got a different dog because, as people know, mine's like a cat. I call her cat dog because she's a little chihuahua, and when she's in the bed, you don't
Oh,
even know she's there. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit
no,
different, isn't it?
I've got a big canny corso. I've got one of these big, huge bulldog type
Uh,
dogs. So
no, it's
there's
too
no
big.
room for me. No.
No, forget that. Anyway, um, thanks for joining me today. And you have a powerful story. Um, as usual, we begin from the beginning. So, what was it like for you growing up?
Well, Dave, my kind of story starts pretty early because um my my I had quite I remember actually when I was a wee girl and I had what I felt was quite an idyllic childhood up to that point. I can remember just kind of bobbing along and, feeling very happy and sort of secure and safe. And I obviously was unaware of other things that were going on, but my father was an alcoholic. He hadn't been, and suddenly he became an alcoholic because of possibly mental health or work pressures, and his alcoholism really hit our family like a sledgehammer. And I went from having this idyllic childhood to just it was just a war zone. So I have one brother, and when we were wee, we used to share a bedroom, and I can just remember so vividly being woken up in the middle of the night with kind of screaming and shouting, and having never heard anything like that before in our house. It was like, we were instantly so frightened, and we went down the stairs to see what was happening, and the door opened and my mum was covered in blood, and it was just carnage. And that just started a series of events that kind of really took over my childhood. I think my dad obviously was in the kind of depths of his drinking, and he had an affair, and that kind of obviously broke up our family. And my I remember so when I was like trying to keep the family together, I thought that was my job. And I tried, I thought that if I could just keep him happy, if I could just be a good girl, that everything would be okay. And and I think so many children kind of take on that role. They think it's something to do with them. And I really did think it was something to do with me. I really thought that if I just could be what he needed me to be, that we could be a family again. And there was just nothing further from the truth. That was just never going to happen. And it really turned our lives completely upside down. We had to move from our family home. We lived in the countryside at that time because my father was from there, and we moved from the country. We moved nearer to where my grandparents stayed at the time, and those were my father's grandparents. So I would go to school as usual. My mum had to work really long hours because she had now was on her own, and my dad would kind of drop in and out, and he would drop in and out, and sometimes he would be okay, and sometimes he would be, you could tell, I could sense that he had been drinking, and just on the turn, you know, he could just turn for absolutely anything, and my mum would again be really violently assaulted. And it just became so, I felt as if I was just a shell of a child. And I remember thinking, you know, where did I feel most safe? And where I felt most safe at the time was with my grandparents, and specifically my grandmother. My mum had to work, as I said, really long hours, and she was working in the city. So she would work and she would be away, and we would be at school, and then we would be, you know, with my grandparents. And my grandmother just felt like such a safe place for me. And I used to remember, you know, always trying to get off school so that I could just be with my grandmother and feel safe. And I did that, and I did that so much. So I would just pretend to be sick all the time. But unfortunately, in that situation where I was sort of seeking comfort, my grandfather used that opportunity, and he was sexually abusing me. And he did that, you know, from when I was about 4 till about 10. And that became this other horrific, horrible secret. And eventually, my mum, just to kind of be near her work, and so that maybe just to get away from all the, I think she thought if she got distance between my dad and her, the violence would lessen. And by this time they were divorced, so, you know, he shouldn't have really been anywhere near her. So we moved, and it should have got better because we'd moved away from that situation. But it actually got worse because I used to have to spend so much more time one-on-one with him. So I used to have to spend like every Wednesday, every weekend with my father. And also that would also mean by proxy, I was spending it with my grandparents. So it was no childhood. It just felt like my whole childhood was surrounded with alcohol and violence and abuse. And I remember it was just, you know, I used to try and deal with it and cope with it. And I remember, you know, being at school and being with friends, and they were just completely, I mean, who knows what was happening in their lives. You know, I really don't know. There could have been lots of things going on, but I can remember always, you know, if it was a Wednesday and I was due to go and see my dad on the Wednesday, I would be saying to them all day, do you think my dad will be drunk tonight? Do you think he'll be drunk tonight? Do you think, thinking that would make a difference? And I obviously wouldn't. But I was just, I don't know why I did that, but I did that. And the kids must have been like, she's crazy. I mean, I'm talking about when I was like 8 years old. And then I would go home and I would be waiting for my dad to come and pick me up. And I would, you know, get my backpack ready, and I would be sitting at the door, and I would be waiting for him, and he would usually be, you know, up to 2 hours late, but I would not leave that spot. And then I would go down to the car, and from the very second that the first syllable that he said to me, I knew he'd been drinking. You know, you just become so attuned to them. You just know he's drunk. And then I would put my hand under the seat, and there would be a bottle of whiskey. And it was just like, and so the nightmare begins. And I mean, my dad actually, he was never violent towards me, but he was violent in his demeanor. He had a very aggressive demeanor, and it just never felt safe. He never felt safe. I just felt so scared of him. And, you know, when I had to spend a weekend with him, as I said, I had an older brother. And because he was older, he could kind of go and see his friends. And I felt it was my job to stay with him and just keep my dad company, sort of thing. And by the time, if I spent a Friday to a Sunday with my dad, by the time I got home, I was an absolute wreck. I was a wreck. And even at that age, I felt so resentful towards my mum, because I thought, you've had a weekend where you seemingly have had fun, and she had a new boyfriend and she was enjoying herself. And I've just had the most horrendous time on my own. And I remember coming back, and I would make myself sick. I would wet the bed just so that I could maybe sleep in beside my mum and feel safe. And I started hearing voices as well. I was just so tormented, and I really did believe that I wasn't safe, and that possibly he would break in and he would hurt us or hurt my mum. So I think my mum got to the point that she was like, something needs to change. I mean, I honestly had no friends, because I was constantly with my dad at the weekends. So I wasn't like, I'd moved and I made friends and I was hanging out with them at the weekends. That wasn't happening. So she did ask, can we change it? Very kind of, can we change it so that weekend on, weekend off? And that was enough for him to just go crazy. And I remember again coming home from school, he was there, which he never usually would come to our house because it was nothing to do with him. And he was there. My mum came home from work. You could just cut the tension with a knife. And she said one word, and then he just, went for her. And I just remember her being beaten and being thrown down the stairs. And I thought she was going to be murdered. And I went into, a neighbour who I didn't know because we hadn't been there that long. And I said, I think my dad's going to kill my mum. Please help. And they actually didn't do anything. They just sat, and maybe for an hour. And then I went back and I was shaking. And she was at the bottom of the stairs and she had blood coming out of her ear. And it was just horrendous. And she actually at that point could have, pressed charges, but she didn't want to put us through that. But it was just, I mean, that was, I think at that point, it was just like, that was the last time that he did that. But it was just such a series of events for a child that was, my whole existence was just consumed with my father and his behaviour. And then, unfortunately, on top of that, being abused by his father, and not feeling safe at any point, and not having any social skills, just not having any real, I wasn't able to develop into maybe the confident little girl that I could have been. I was a wreck of a child. So ultimately, that kind of went on. That went on for a while. And the next kind of point that I would recall was when I started kind of asserting my own control. And that was when I developed an eating disorder, because before that I probably, through the drinking and everything else, trying to self-soothe myself, I would eat. So I was chubby. I had, curly hair. I was like frizzy hair, and we didn't have any money. So I had no branded trainers. I just stuck out like a sore thumb in this new place. And I realized that when I stopped eating, that actually people for a change took notice of me. They actually said, for all of a sudden, people saw me. And I really loved that feeling. I loved the feeling of just being important, maybe, or feel, it really, obviously, when you look at the human needs, it ticked a few boxes. And I had a really, bad eating disorder for a good couple of years. And then I kind of found alcohol. So that kind of went up until I was, say, about 15. I had an eating disorder. And I have to say that, although my dad did obviously have a real terrible drinking habit, my mum was a very middle lane drinker. I only saw her drinking and saw it being fun. I didn't see it being a problem at all. She became more vivacious and more, relaxed when she had a drink. So on one hand, alcohol was just like the devil, but when I saw it with my mum, there was really none of that. And I up to that point, I'd always said, I'll never drink, because I just saw the torment that it had caused my father. But I can't quite remember exactly what happened, but I think it was along the lines of I was going to like a school disco or something like that. And my mum had, she was of the mind that if you drank in the house or if we drank in front of her, that would be safer. And I can kind of see what she was, the logic in it. But, I remember, I think she gave me peach schnapps or something like that, the good old peach schnapps. And I loved it, and I loved the feeling that it gave me. So I would be going to a school disco feeling like I was so ugly and so nobody wanted to talk to me. And I had that alcohol and I just felt like, wow, here I am, here I come. And that's what it did for me. And I just felt like it gave me this confidence, and it made me feel as if I was special. And I really did love the feeling, even the warm feeling when I drank it, and it kind of like percolated through my body, and I just loved how it made me feel. And I think that I was able to kind of, I mean, not for a long time, it was just like occasionally I'd have a peach schnapps or something like that. But then we went to a family gathering and there was alcohol everywhere. And it was very much like, you have a peach schnapps and lemonade, whatever it was. And then I just loved that feeling. And then somebody else maybe gave me a vodka. And before I knew it, I just, the whole kind of evening or day passed by. And I was getting really, really drunk. And I woke up the next day and I just woke up with a feeling of absolute dread. I'd never experienced it before. And I woke up and I remembered that I had said something to my mum about having been abused. And I just wanted to block it out. And she confronted me and she was, you told me everything. And I obviously had been holding on to it for so long that as soon as I had the opportunity, it all just came tumbling out. And that was pretty horrendous. It was just like I wanted to just put it all back in the box and I couldn't. But from there, again, it was like there were so many incidents where I would be able to drink. I wouldn't black out or anything like that. But then there was times when I did, and it was just so bad. And around that time, I got a job in a hotel, and I got a job in a hotel as like a glass collector because I was only 15 at the time. And so I was in there. I'd lost all this weight. I had started having a bit of a relationship with alcohol, and I was put into this situation, and it was filled with like a lot of older guys. And I had never even had a boyfriend before this situation. So I went in there and they started complimenting me. They started, I started feeling like I was actually pretty, because I'd felt like the most disgusting person that existed, to suddenly people were, paying me compliments. And it became like, I just loved going there. It just became everything to me. So I went from being this really studious, girl. I mean, I found it really difficult to actually concentrate at school, but because I think there was just so much going on. But I went from being this really studious girl that wanted to do well to just my whole life revolved around when I went to this hotel and worked, because I just felt special. And I used to drink before I would go to work because I knew that would make me a bit more able to deal with these older guys. They had all the chat, they had all the patter, and I didn't. So whenever they spoke to me, I would go bright red. So I used to drink before I would go to work. And eventually, one of these guys and I had a relationship. Well, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it's a relationship, but basically my first sexual experience, the guy was 39 years old and I was, 15, 16. And I thought he loved me and I thought that we would be together, and I thought he would be he would like take care of me and I would be safe. And, I can remember even thinking in my mind, I won't need to drink anymore. I'll be able to just be taken care of and he'll love me. But he just wanted nothing to do with me. He got what he wanted and then he just discarded me. And that it made me go on such a downward spiral. I mean, I don't know what my mum thought was happening. I mean, she seemed to be quite oblivious to the whole situation. So I just, I was, in my mind, I thought to get back at him, to make him jealous, I'm just going to get in with another crowd of people. And it was another crowd of older guys. And they introduced me to cocaine. And, I was doing things that I would just never have dreamed of doing. And I was just desperate to be loved and looking in all the wrong places. And I was like a lamb to the slaughter. It was just such a dangerous situation for somebody like me to have been in. And I think that, in those situations, I felt like, people, you can imagine older women in these situations would have been looking at me thinking, oh, she's just, look at her, she's a bit of an upstart. But actually, I was just looking for some significance. I was just looking to be loved and cared for. But when you've been sexualized as a child, you just don't know, it's just a different equation for you. It's just not the same. You just don't think about things in the same way. And when you're in a situation like that, you're just, it was just a recipe for disaster. So it was a pretty horrible. It was horrible, but I do say I am lucky, Lucy, and I do still believe that. And out of that situation, I don't know how I did it, but I ended up, because I actually left school. I left school because I didn't want these guys to know I was still at school, which is horrendous when you think about it. But I applied for an exchange program and I went to Italy for a year. And I was able to kind of live like a teenager there for a year. But alcohol was still playing a huge part. I mean, I went to a house where my family were kind of really upper class Italians, and I thought I was going to go to somewhere where it would be like bowls of pasta and lasagna and, this really warm environment, but it wasn't like that. My family were quite different, and they were, they used to play violin at night and play the piano. They didn't have a TV, and there's me landing like, what the hell is this? And I went to school there, and I went to school every day, but I would finish at like 3 o'clock, and my family wouldn't come home from work till about 8 o'clock. So we wouldn't have dinner till 8. So I had all this time on my hands. And I used to go to like the local bar, and I would sit and I would have what they called Cuba Libre. And I would have 2 large Cuba Libre, which was like free pouring rum. And I would be absolutely steaming. And then I would go up and have dinner, and they would have wine at dinner and stuff like that. So even though I was in a totally different environment, it was still playing a huge part in my life. I had real social anxiety and boredom, and I used to stave it off with alcohol. And I had again, there was times over there where I blacked out and I couldn't remember. They seemed a bit oblivious to it, but it was a beautiful experience in so many ways, because I really got to connect. I went to school with children that were like maybe 3 years younger than me, and I was able to sort of have a teenage experience, so to speak, and it was lovely. I came back to Scotland thinking I'm going to go to university now, because they were quite academic and I really wanted to do well. And I came back to Scotland, and I ended up in yet another relationship with a much older man. And again, somebody that really was narcissistic, didn't treat me well, didn't have my best intentions. And that's what I was attracted to, these types of men. And again, he treated me really badly, and I leaned on alcohol to numb the pain. I just, the rejection, I felt as if even in all amongst all that, I had such self-hatred, but I also had a feeling that I was a nice person and I was, I was attractive. So why amn't I enough? Why can't you just love me? But I just picked all the wrong people. So that's what happened. So again, when he mistreated me, I just went on a downward spiral again. And it was years and years of being in extremely dangerous situations, blacking out all the time, not knowing how I got home, waking up in places and not knowing how I got there. And just the self-loathing was just all consuming. I mean, I used to have jobs and I would just go out. I wouldn't care. It would be like a Wednesday night. I would go out and then I wouldn't make work the next day and I would make an excuse. I'd pull a sickie. I'd change jobs and I just did it. And, sometimes I'd be able to drink. When I say moderately, I mean to extreme excess. And then other times I would drink. It would almost be like, I need to drink. I need a session. I on a few occasions, I'd drink like a litre bottle of vodka. And I don't know how I managed to do that and survive, but I did do that. And I did it, maybe with someone else. But, it really was horrendous. And waking up and the feelings, it was just so terrible. Luckily, I met my now ex-husband and he was a different kettle of fish. He wasn't a narcissist. He wasn't a bad person. He was a good guy, but we partied together and we partied very, very hard. He saved my life on a few occasions where I had choked on my sick. I got to the point where, I stood on a windowsill 3 stories up and really wanted to die. And there were so many occasions like that. I just, I couldn't recover from hangovers. We would drink all night. It would all be under the guise of a party. But my way of drinking, it wasn't that. It was to numb pain. As you can imagine, I had so much pain that I had just pushed down. And my way of dealing with it was to drink. So if we started drinking, I would drink until I blacked out. And the next day I would have horrendous panic attacks. I would honestly think that I was going to have a heart attack. So I would ask him to take me to the hospital. And then it got to the point that when I started drinking, and I think you had touched on this with Dr. David Nutt, when you talked about when you drink to a certain point, you can actually start having the panic attacks. Well, it's not the hangover, it's actually on the way up. You start having the effects of it was like I was having panic attacks while I was, just starting to drink. And I was like, what's going to be next? I can't cope with this. I can't live like this. And we met somebody that we had actually used to drink with. And this guy, I thought, had been a much worse kind of drunk than I was. And he'd seemed to got his life together. And I was like, how did you do it? How did you do it? Because I had been looking up things like AA, but I just was too nervous to go to them. I just felt like I didn't believe that I was an alcoholic per se. I just wanted to moderate my drinking. So this guy told me, I've been to this lady, she's an alcohol counsellor. So we got her number and, I made the appointment and I went to see her on a Monday morning, and obviously on the Sunday night I got rip-roaring drunk. And I went to see her and I stopped drinking. And when I met her, I really connected with her, and she'd also stopped drinking like many, many years before. And I was just at that point so desperate. I was so desperate. I was like, it's this or I'm going to die. And I don't even think people from the outside would have thought that. I think they would have thought she drinks too much, she makes an arse of herself, she becomes a bit of a liability. But they probably didn't think that I was to the stage, but I was just such an overthinker. So between drinking And I had tried to stop myself. I tried moderation. I tried stopping vodka and drinking wine. I didn't, I mean, even when I did drink, it was like once or twice a week, but I did it to it was binge drinking to such excess that it took such a toll on my body that I just couldn't, mentally, I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't deal with it anymore. And so when I met this lady after trying to stop myself, it was just the answer, or it felt like the answer to all my prayers. So
Sounded like when I met my friend Piers that day, when he said to me, "How would you like to join me for 3 months?" Because on paper, it sounds like you just stopped. But it sounds to me that there was a lot of internal dialect going on for a long time inside your head. You know, standing on the window ledge 3 stories up, and there's something inside you that's saying, you either sort this out or you die. And that woman that you met came along at the perfect time. And I've always described it as a 12-hour opportunity that I had, like you had then. You either go through that door and see what's the other side, or this isn't going to end up well, you know.
yeah.
And after all that, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. I was captivated by that whole story. And, you know, it's interesting to me. I want to ask you a question in a minute, but it's interesting to me that you always look for an older man. That's one thing. But two, I'm interested in when you told your mum about the abuse, how
Mhm.
did she react to that?
I think she felt, in retrospect, so at the time, it just felt like a bit of a daze, and I didn't even want to engage with her. But I think she was very angry, but she did, God love her. This, I don't think I've ever shared this with anyone, but she had said that she'd always had a question mark over him,
Yeah.
and she felt uncomfortable around him, and she'd seen him with another member of the family, female member of the family, and she felt uncomfortable about what she'd seen. So she shared that with me since. She was very angry. She wanted to press charges, but it was very reactive, and it wasn't at the time. It was just too much for me, too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
But I have to say that many, many years later, my mum and sorry,
Do you want to pause?
my mum and my ex-husband, they confronted him. They confronted my grandfather, and he admitted what he'd done. And I'm forever grateful for them for doing that. He's dead now. But I had told my father and he didn't believe me. And it took my ex-husband. I was heavily pregnant at the time, and I had such a horrendous pregnancy. It was my second pregnancy, and I had such I did suffer from obtrusive thoughts constantly, and my ex-husband and my mum, you know, took it upon themselves when they saw how much pain I was in to do something, and they confronted him. And I'll be forever grateful just that people can acknowledge that it actually did happen.
Mm. That you were believed almost.
Yeah, I felt as if a lot of people, because when I was drunk, I used to share with people what had happened to me, and it almost lessened what happened to me because it wasn't sharing with the right people. It was
Yeah.
just sharing. It was almost like, I need to tell people that this
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
And then nobody, I think I wasn't believed. And when my father didn't believe me, it was so painful. You know, I used to phone him when I was drunk, and I would tell my dad, and he wouldn't believe me. He just thought I was looking for attention. And when my mum and my ex-husband confronted my grandfather, it just meant everything to me. And the fact that he admitted it all, it meant everything.
Once he admitted it all, how did your father react after that?
When he admitted it and they told him what he had said, he said he was going to, he said that he was going to kill him. But in actual fact, very shortly afterwards, when he thought I was going to maybe take it to the police and press charges, he put the pressure on me not to do anything that would ruin his life, and that he didn't need that sort of attention. So again, my dad had many opportunities to make it right with me, to show me that he loved me, and he didn't. So, and I just didn't want to. It was too difficult at that point. I was heavily pregnant, and I did speak to the police and things like that, but I just couldn't at the time.
Oh, are you okay?
Yeah. It's sorry. It's just like you hold these things in, and then it's.
I know. And I'm really grateful you've shared it. Thank you so much. So you met this woman and you stopped drinking.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Did you just stop, or did you reduce?
No, I just stopped. She was, I used to go and see her for 2 hours every week. And, I didn't drive at the time. That's one of the things that I remember, because I was always hungover, so I could never really make a lesson. So I used to get the bus, and it was like an hour bus journey to go to her, 2 hours back. So I was really, really committed. I was always looking to stop drinking. And one of the things that was a huge driving force for me was I had, through this mist of getting drunk and whatever else, I'd got engaged. And I just knew that there was no chance I was ever going to have children. And I always wanted to have children. I dreamed of being a mum, and I was never going to have children and put them through what I went through. I was never going to let them be unsafe. And I was never going to be a mum that they didn't feel safe around me, and they didn't know, they had to guess if it was a drinking, was a hungover. I would never do it. I don't know where I got that. Even when I was drunk and I didn't know how I would do it, I knew that I would never do that.
So you either go one way or the other, I feel. It's quite often the case.
Yeah. And I think that when I met that lady, it was like, only maybe a year before I got married. So it was very much on my horizon that children would be on the, they were on the plans, and it was definitely what I wanted to do. And I just wanted to be, I knew that inside me, despite all these things inside me, was a good person, and I wanted to see that person. I didn't want to look in the mirror any longer and just feel wretched. I wanted to look in the mirror and feel like, and it started happening, and it took a long time. It wasn't easy. But I started to like who I was becoming.
And you was 24, right, when you stopped drinking?
Yeah.
Which is young. Yeah. And how did you manage the feelings from the past in the beginning? Did you get any support, or was it through your need for children, or how did you do it?
I didn't have a lot of support with that. I did find that when I stopped drinking, a lot of the stuff, she kind of went through a 12-step program, and she kept, and I totally understand where she was coming from, and I understand the teaching. You can't drive forwards while looking in the rear view mirror. But when you have such a lot of pain and these sorts of things that have happened to you, you can only push it down so far and it just resurfaces again. So I probably started, and I was very lucky because my ex-husband stopped drinking the day before me. So we were in a bubble of, you know, I felt like I really hadn't had a lot of relationships, and I never had the opportunity to be, you know, in a relationship where it wasn't toxic. So him and I, we kind of became teenagers again. We were like, let's go to Nando's, let's go to the cinema. You know, we didn't have alcohol in the house. We didn't have people around with alcohol in the house. I did not want to go to a pub. I didn't want to do anything to do. So I was very much in a lovely alcohol-free bubble. And that, I don't know if I could have done that without him. You know, I really, really don't. I think that support, because I mean, even my mum, who I love to death, would have been saying to me, you can drink in moderation. I mean, she'll still say that to me now. She truly believes that.
Yeah.
You can, so if I hadn't had my ex-husband, I would have been at home, let's say, and I would have been like, just have a wine. And if you can have just one, you're all right. And we'll see how it goes. No, that wouldn't have worked. I know it wouldn't have worked. So I was very, very lucky in that we could be in an alcohol-free bubble together. But the feelings, all those kind of feelings that you're talking about, they were just simmering under the surface, you know, and I was kind of oblivious for a good wee while, but they soon came, they soon kind of popped up.
Yeah, I say that's like, we talk about the emotional sobriety, right? And quite often in the beginning, it's actually trying to learn how to stop drinking, learn how to live a life without drinking. You know, you didn't drink every day, but, you know, it was very present in your life every day, thinking about it. And that's why I compare it to learning to drive, that once you've kind of worked out how to do it, and then there's the next phase, and it's kind of working out who you are, what your identity is. And then I imagine for you, with your past where you've had no role models in your life, no structure, and maybe that's why that 12-step thing worked for you, because there was structure there that they began to rise to the surface then.
Yeah. I mean, I like you, and obviously I relate to you in so many ways, because I really didn't want alcohol to be a part of I didn't want it to be part of my daily life. I mean, I have been to a few AA meetings along the years, but they just didn't resonate with me. I wanted to be like, I don't care about alcohol. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I certainly don't want to go over my story on a daily basis. I don't want to, you know, and I do understand that it helps so many people, but it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. I don't even know if it was the 12-step program that helped me with that, lady. I think it was just having space for myself in that week, those 2 hours, to just, like, you know, focus on where I wanted to, you know, how I could remove alcohol. And almost, you know, she was a very maternal woman as well. So I just felt as if, you know, I was in such a safe and lovely space. And I almost wanted her to be proud of me. She reminded me of my granny. So I found that to be so encouraging. And I'm very like that. I attach to people for reasons like that. So, but I mean, what happened, that kind of, when we were talking about these feelings, when I actually had my children, these feelings that I pushed down all came back up. And I actually don't know how I managed to stay sober during those times, because when I say, I mean, I had postnatal depression, but I had almost psychosis. So I had my baby, and I was, obviously it was my life's dream to have a baby. But I had read, when I say I had obtrusive thoughts, they were just debilitating. And they started, I think, when I got pregnant. And I read somewhere that, you know, I read somewhere that it said, if you've been abused, you will become an abuser. And from that moment on, I could not wrap my head around that. And when I had my baby, I did not want to be left with her alone at any point, because my worst fear was that something would happen to her. And it made no sense, because all I wanted to do was take care of her. But I did not want to be left alone with her. And it totally ruined my time with my child. I'm talking about every single day, every single day. And then I had when I had my second child, I actually started those feelings again when I got pregnant. And it was just horrendous, to the point that when I had her, I stopped eating. I really felt like I wanted to die. I really felt like I wanted to die, because I hadn't dealt with those feelings. Those feelings were there, and they came out when I had postnatal depression. And, you know, the doctors kind of gave me medication, but it made no difference. And I didn't verbalize what I was thinking. You know, I didn't verbalize that I'd read this thing. At that point, it would have been like 3 years before. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was scared to be left with my child. And it was all consuming. It was horrendous. So those are things that you just don't expect to happen. You think that I'm sober, I'm doing all the right things, why is this coming up? But I do feel like it's kind of when you're brought up as a child in those situations where you are under constant stress, and you basically got a codependent relationship with your father, and you're second guessing everything. That's how I've been trained to be. That's just how I am. And alcohol used to really just numb all that. It would just turn it for a while. It would turn it down, then it would ramp back up. But I didn't think that when I was sober that would happen. And it did. And it really, really took the pleasure out of me having my children, which was really, really, it was horrendous
Devastating,
situation.
really. I'm reading a book at the moment. You might know it, The Body Keeps a Score.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff in there about PTSD. And, you know, for what you've been through in your life, it's almost like your nervous system's reacting off the back of that when you had your children. You know, it comes out, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's so cruel. It's so cruel. It's like the thing that you've always wanted and you dream of, and it almost felt like, you know, what happened to me keeps causing these scars again and again. But actually what happened was I did eventually, now that wasn't then, this is maybe 3 years ago, I did MDMA therapy, trauma therapy with a doctor. And it honestly was transformative. It really, really was for me. You know, and I was very, very skeptical about doing that, because obviously being sober, I felt as if what does that mean for my sobriety? But it was very much, you know, under medical supervision, and it helped me immeasurably. It really, really did. It helped me to release a lot of trauma. And, you know, I'm just so grateful for it. I've heard so many things, and I heard about, you know, your conversation with Professor Nutt, and it really made a huge difference to me.
Can you elaborate on how that worked?
Yeah, so basically, the format that because I mean here it's illegal to do here, but I found a doctor who was a GP who's also a psychologist, and we did say 8 sessions together, and then I was able to get the MDMA, and I used, he told me how much to take. I had to test it, do all these things, and then I basically took it and I listened to like music, and I already had set an intention. So you set an intention about what you're trying to do, and I went through. You know, it lasted for about 6 hours, and I was able to release so much trauma and pain, and then I was able to talk to him, and we integrated it. So I mean, I would have loved to, I only did 2 sessions because, to be honest, I just felt like even, it just was, I felt like it was too much for me to do in those situations by myself, really. But I feel as if I would have loved to have continued to do it. And, but it did, it almost felt like it went to the deep bowels of my body and brought up things that I'd been holding on to and just allowed me to release them. And I do believe, I mean, I still have so many areas that I need to work on, specifically in relationships. But it allowed me to let go of a lot of the trauma and forgive people for what's happened to me. And I can still feel sad about it. I can still feel like, I know that it wasn't fair what's happened to me, but I was able to forgive my father, even to an extent forgive my grandfather, because holding on to that was doing more pain to me.
Mm.
It wasn't affecting them, it was me. So I found that to be really, really helpful.
You're an incredible woman, honestly. What you told me so far, how you've dealt with it is amazing. And that, not everyone will know about what treatment you've had or understand it. And maybe on your Instagram page, you can elaborate, or you might have something more detailed. But I'm so pleased you managed to find something to unlock that pain, because a lot of people go through their whole lives holding on to it, and it just rips through your life and other people around you, because you can not let people in, and you're not living your authentic life, are you? All the time you're holding that pain. And, I often revert back to that statement by Gabor Mate, is not why the addiction, why the pain,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us in our life medicate ourselves to hold that pain back. And quite often that, if you don't manage that pain, quite often you either go back to your drug of choice or to something else. So I'm so pleased. Excuse me. So how did life look like after that?
After the therapy, the trauma therapy, I mean, it takes a while to kind of work through, but I started to see that I mean, up to that point, I'd also got divorced through that. I went through a very long 10-year divorce. So I had a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. I hadn't worked through these specific traumas. So I felt like a weight had been lifted, and I started to actually think, I'm okay. I'm like, you're an okay person, and I started to believe when my children would say, you're amazing, Mum, we love you. Everything I do is for my children. So for them to be proud of me, is everything. And I really started to feel like I could accept love. And I think, I mean, I had a very long divorce. It was 10 years, which took a lot out of me. But I'm actually, I'm friends now with my ex-husband, which if you had asked me 2 years ago, you would think would have been practically impossible. But for my children, I believed that was the right thing to do. And I am so grateful for all the things that he did do, which had a positive impact on my life. And I've kind of forgiven him for, the just dragging out such a long thing. It just doesn't matter. Things like that don't matter. What matters to me is how I can be the best version of myself, how I can move forward, how I can show these 2 little girls that I've got that anything is possible, to believe in yourself, to help other women, to help women that were me 18 years ago, or even were me when I was going through, pregnancies and having these horrible, obtrusive thoughts and thinking, I must be the world's worst person because I must be the only person that thinks these things. You're not. You've just went through a really horrible, hard time, and you need to grab somebody's hand and get some help I mean, I didn't, the Instagram and things like that weren't around, you know, all those years ago when I was going through these things. There wasn't that ability to get to listen to somebody and think, God, they've been through that too. And
Yeah.
it, you know, these sort of mediums are just they're so important for people that are recovering and, you know, are getting sober or are recovering from trauma. It's so important.
It's the connection, isn't it? It's so
Yeah.
important. You know, why these interviews are so important, and people are going to be listening to this in bits, I'm sure. But so pleased and happy that you've managed to turn your life around at such a young age as well. You know, stopping drinking at 24 was the best thing that you could ever gifted yourself. And I know it's been a long journey,
Yeah.
my word that I don't normally use, but it's appropriate. You know, and I didn't know about your divorce. I'm sorry to hear that. And that's another layer to it as well, added to everything else, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you've managed now to turn that around so you're now friends, which I think is important for your two girls as well, because,
Yeah.
you know, I've got a son who's 30 now, but we separated him and his mum when he was quite young. And we always said, look, it's so important for his upbringing that we are compatible with how we bring him up, you know, the same boundaries, which we stuck to. It wasn't, oh, you're
Yeah.
with your dad now, you can have this, you can have that. We had the same rules. And he's grown up to be an amazing man, you know, off the
Yeah.
back of it. And, you know, it's really important. And it sounds to me like finally you've started to get things together that are working for you. And when you say your girls are so proud of you, it's important for me to ask, are you proud of you as well?
I'm proud of where my path has taken me to now. I feel as if I always would, I wouldn't put it this way. I would not change anything that's happened to me, because if I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I'm still a work in progress. Who isn't a work in progress? But I'm so proud of the fact that I've been able to weather the storm for 18 years and not drink. And I've been able to show up for my children. And I'm now, like, you know, I'm able to work with people and relate to them and be, you know, and I'm happy to share my story because I want to help people feel like they're not alone in any way. And I'm proud of me because I think that that's all of those things are quite an achievement given where I was.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many layers to your story that people will relate to from different walks of life, you know,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly powerful. And what does life look like for you moving ahead? Because for me, people ask me that, and I think I don't know. Actually, I'm quite. I feel quite excited, and I've got a few things in the pipeline that I'm looking forward to. But there's no. I'm like quite open to the flow of it. Really, I'm quite relaxed about it. I've got no real agenda, even though I'm bloody geriatric. I always say that's putting myself down, but it's an inner joke, really. Um, but I'm quite easygoing with it, you know. I think what something come to me that's good, it's great, you know. So how do you see your future moving forward?
Well, I want to continue on the path I'm on. I mean, I'm all about every day. I still battle. I still battle with obtrusive thoughts. So I really do have to try and manage my life so that I'm around really good people, positive people who really genuinely care for me. And that's difficult because for so many years I wasn't. So I really just want to flourish and I want to help as many people as I can. I want to be as engaged a mother as I possibly can be. I want to I really want to be happy. I mean, I've been single for a long time, and I would, you know, it's not like I'm looking for a partner to complete me, like to save me. And I was, up until very recently, I was looking for, even through all this work, I was looking for somebody to save me. And I've came to the realization that I don't need someone to save me. I just want to become the best version of me. And that will be reflected back to me in a partner ultimately. And I've got plenty of time. And I've already, the love of my life are my 2 children. And so if I meet someone else, that's a bonus. But I just want to kind of do as much good work as I can and just, you know, keep on this path.
What a gorgeous answer. That is just beautiful. Thank you. And I'm going to round it off there because that's just the perfect way to end this incredible interview. Thank you so much, Lucy. It's been, well, a ride all the way along through this interview. You know, it's a fascinating story, and I'm just so pleased that you've got to where you are today. And I'm really grateful that you shared it with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your time and for everything that you're doing. It's so, so special and so important. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lucy.